Good evening, my name is Kim Sue. You can reach me at compassionatelearning.net, at urbantutor.org, or on Instagram at compassionatelearning. Thanks for joining me tonight. The question that I want to pose to you and discuss is, when is it more important to address self-regulation rather than executive functioning? When a student is failing or not performing up to par in school, executive functioning can really be a godsend. Helps them to be organized, teaches them good study skills and study habits, helps them to improve their memory, prioritize tasks and switch tasks, right? All that kind of stuff. That's great, but that's really only if a student has certain kinds of security and safety in place. Some of the students who I help or who I am called to help, they don't have those kinds of things in place at all. Sorry, I'm just going to turn on I realize I'm not recording with my mic, so I'm going to do that now. I'm not going to be able to edit this, so I'm just doing it in one shot. So some of the students who I am called to help, they don't have the same kind of secure base that many students need, right? They don't have the same kind of secure base that every student needs, actually. So these are students who have been expelled or suspended, sometimes multiple times. Sometimes some of them have been expelled from more than one school in the same school year. Some of them have been playing out this pattern for several years. Some of them are fighting or indulging in intoxicants or doing other things that have repercussions that are going to take them years to unpack, right? In situations where your child may be facing another expulsion or maybe not right for the situation that they're in and may have to leave a school or leave a community, we're faced with the question of what do we do now? Not everyone wants to homeschool their kid. Not everyone can homeschool their kid. If a school doesn't work out, or if a kid is refusing to go to school, refusing to participate, refusing to do the work, and they're failing out or getting expelled, can feel like a pretty desperate situation, right? Some parents will default to kind of study skills and organization, accountability partners. They'll come to me and say, we need you to monitor all of his work, all of her work, and to be an accountability partner and to make sure that everything starts getting done and turned in on time. We'll hire you to sit with our student for 4 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever it takes, right? This kind of feels like forcing to the student, and almost never works in a situation where a student just will not participate. In this case, rather than the skills of executive functioning, which have to do with using skills like memorization, prioritization, time management, task switching, those things are almost completely off the table. This person is, dysregulated emotionally to the point where they're not able to make healthy choices like someone who wants to be in the school or in the situation that they're in. Let me explain to you a little bit more about self-regulation versus executive functioning. So I just listed some of the aspects of executive functioning, and I mentioned that those are skills, right? Those are tools. What allows us to use the skills and tools at any given time is our emotional state, right? Think of it as the commonly used term, the window of tolerance. If a person is working within their window of tolerance, they are regulated. They are emotionally regulated. They're able to make healthy choices, to make decisions which are going to let them get their work done, get their work in on time, or at least close to on time. They'll be able to perform at a level that's a little bit higher, and they'll be able to deal with the setbacks that are part of the learning process, part of the process of trying, right? The more you try, the more number of times you succeed, but the number of times you fail and the setbacks will also increase, right? That's like part of the whole process. For someone who is regulated, we have the perspective that, okay, we're going to give this a try. Sometimes we're going to succeed and sometimes we're going to fail, and we're just going to take it in stride and keep going forward because it's the long game we want to play. Excuse me. students who are dysregulated, students who have such severe anxiety or severe anger around their performance and their situation, they're not able to use the tools of, time management and task switching and prioritization. Those things are just like off the table for now. I think in cases where students are in such desperate situations, it's better to focus on the self-regulation, to give them tools that, instead of allowing them to work with their assignments, allow them to work with their perspective and with their feelings. And it's almost never the case that parents have been making room for students to do this kind of work at home. So usually when a student comes to me in a situation where they're either failing out of school, maybe they failed a couple of times, gone to one school or another. I've already listed some of the worst case scenarios, right? For students who are in situations like that, usually I start by helping them to form some perspective. And for a young person, the most important part of the perspective is usually what kind of choices do I have? If I draw out on a piece of paper the areas where they're really happy and the areas that make them really unhappy, oftentimes they believe that the things that make them unhappy are things, like school and being too young to drive a car, being too young to work, being too young to make other big life decisions at the time that might provide them some relief, like sitting for their GED so they don't have to suffer through high school anymore, which can be the best choice for some students, or enlisting in the military, which also can be the best choice for some students. And it's really frustrating and enraging for some students not to be able to have a choice in those situations. They have to go to school. They have to be homebound or bound in their small town because they can't drive. They can't get out of those situations. They don't have any money of their own, so that their choices are extremely limited. What those students often feel is that their whole lives are out of their own control. Like they don't have any choice. They often self-victimize. They blame external factors. They blame other people and other systems like school or the family for the situation that they're in. And they're not entirely wrong. I just listed many of the ways that they don't have choice, that they don't have agency. But it really helps these students to start to see where they do have choices. For example, a student who is not going to class is actually creating some choice for themselves. I often see students who go to half of their classes, sometimes students who don't go to any of their classes, or students who go to one class a week, and then the next week they'll go to all classes, and then the next week they'll go to half, and it just goes up and down like that, right? And what they're doing is they're prioritizing other things like staying up late, having fun, hanging out with their friends, maybe a sport that they're really into. It doesn't have to be something entirely social, right? But they're putting other things ahead of their rest and ahead of their homework and ahead of their going to class. They're creating choices, right? And it can be empowering for a student in that situation to see, oh, I am actually making a choice right now. I do actually have a choice. And sometimes they're able, very early in the process of self-regulation coaching, to turn that switch of if I can choose not to go to class, that means it really is up to me whether I go to class or not. And sometimes students in those situations will actually choose to go to class more or choose to do more work, right? So sometimes just framing things as look at the areas where you think you have no choice. You actually are making choices right now. None of them, not enough of them may be healthy, and we want you to make more healthy choices, right? Let's see if we can get you to the point where you're able to do that. But if you can help someone to adjust their perspective, oh, I actually have some choice, it can be a real game changer for them just on their own. Other students, they need a lot more support, and they need other factors that actually are external, that are anxiety provoking, to change before they're able to make those healthy choices. So, Yeah, some things are a matter of the student's choice. Some things are being created by the student, like whether they go to class or not. But some things genuinely are out of control of the student, are beyond the student's choice, beyond the student's agency. And I think probably the most significant thing that causes a student to suffer and then causes a student to avoid. Avoidance is like the primary way that most human beings deal with suffering, right? We run away from things that are painful, things that are uncomfortable. We avoid doing homework. Some people procrastinate. That in my book, that's a mild version, right? Some students stop going to school altogether. That's a more extreme version. I think that the most severe thing that students suffer from is the judgment of their parents. So when I say judgment, I don't mean evaluation of whether whether a decision is good or bad. I mean a parent saying, or giving the impression, not, they don't even have to say it, right? But giving the impression to the child that if they do well, they are approved of, loved, and if they don't do well, they are not approved of, which the child interprets often as not loved. Now, you might not mean to send these messages to your child. In fact, you might not be sending them at all. It may just be that you are frustrated and sad or not feeling generally positive about what your child is putting themselves through, and your child is interpreting that, perceiving that as judgment. There may be no judgment on your part at all, but the question needs to be asked: how much of this person's, the child, how much of this person's avoidance of healthy choices is because they feel like they're disapproved of or unloved even because of those choices, or lack of performance or failure. And it may sound counterintuitive that someone who is being judged negatively because they miss a day of school, or because they're not going to class or not doing their work, it may sound counterintuitive that someone who's making those choices would choose to keep making them, right? It's almost like that's a positive feedback mechanism. You would think that if someone does something that's causing suffering, like skipping class, that they would choose to turn that around because they want to avoid the suffering. But human beings don't work like that, unfortunately, right? Sometimes we take our hand off the stove and never touch it again, and sometimes we have to touch it 2 or 3 times before we figure out, oh, this is really not working for me. And oftentimes in school, we don't learn until it's too late. We learn only once we fail the class. Sometimes we have to fail multiple classes. Sometimes we have to get expelled. Sometimes we have to drop out and then go back later and finish what we wanted to start, finish what we started, right? So the question is always worth asking: am I placing some, it's called educational anxiety, am I placing some parental educational anxiety on my child? Is my child experiencing judgment, withdrawal or withholding of love, anxiety, or even anger, frustration, anger, from me or from their parents in response to less than acceptable performance at school? If that is the case, and the child is in the cycle, if the student is in the cycle of repeating the behavior, then the only way to help that person out of that cycle is to give them the necessary support and safety. Think about what safety and support would feel like to someone who's afraid of their parents' disapproval. It would feel like the safety to not be disapproved of, right? It would feel like approval. It would feel like support. Now, where I come in is the perspective adjustment that I mentioned before, and also in self-awareness training. And for most students, this is a process that they have only been through if they have a therapist. I'm not comparing myself to a therapist, but whatever. It's part of meditation, it's part of personal growth. therapists don't have a corner on the market on self-awareness, nor should anyone, right? It should be owned by everyone, especially young people. When you help a young person to really start to earnestly dig a little bit below the surface, what is below the aversion to school? What is below the I'm going to stay home because I got better things to do than go to school? There's other things that are just more fun, or school sucks except for my friends, or maybe even because of my friends. I am not going to school today, right? When you help them dig below that surface and they start to realize that they have some intense feelings like some anger or some anxiety or fear or some sadness around what's happening to them in their school life, man, it can be, in addition to an eye-opener, it can be really, really, really empowering for that person. They start to experience, once they say these things out loud, once they name these feelings and realize that they have them, they can sometimes just, be with them and process them and start to move forward a little bit more. Like I said, some students are able to do that, and some students are not able to self-regulate, and they're going to need a little bit more of the support in the way of having judgment mitigated or removed, having the parents start to say, yeah, your situation is a result of the choices that you have made, but your situation is a result of the choices that you have made, and I am here to support you. We're going to figure this out together. Okay, you've been expelled from school. We together are going to figure out what is your next step. How do we help you work towards finishing school? How do we help you be around your friends, in community with your friends, right? How can we support you in that? Maybe that means making sure that your kid stays in an extracurricular activity that some of his friends are in, giving your kid a little bit extra leeway to hang out with his friends after school or on the weekends or whatever, so that he or she still sees their friends. And then there's the academic support, right? Which might look like, we're going to send you to this local school, which we know, is not that great, and we know you're going to suffer there a little bit, maybe a lot, but it's only going to be for the rest of the school year, and then we're going to help you. We're going to make a different decision. We'll put you in a different school. We'll take another step, right? We'll get you a tutor so that you can catch up on your work a little bit and maybe learn to self-regulate some. And it might also look like, well, we're gonna homeschool you for a little while. Here's a curriculum where we don't have time to supervise you, so we're gonna give you the work, and we need you to check in with us at the end of the day to make sure that the work is done. There are many options, right? But creating a support system, creating a way forward for someone who has failed severely, while saying to them, okay, we're here as a result of your choices, yes, and we're going to move forward now, can be incredibly empowering, and can create that sense of safety and security that a young student needs. So parents are not always capable of doing this themselves. Look, the perspective of a child, as off as it can be, is sometimes minuscule compared to the perspective of a parent, how off that can be. So if that is the case, if you feel at your wit's end and you don't know where to begin with your child, if you feel like you've tried everything, extending love and compassion towards the child, but the hand goes up, the door is closed, the conversation is not there, the trust is no longer there, then having someone coach your child through self-regulation is a great idea. Having your kid go to therapy is a great idea. Thinking about how you're going to support your child academically and socially is the order of the day. You know where you can find me. My name is Kim Sue, and you can find me at compassionatelearning.net or on Instagram at compassionatelearning. I hope that some of the information here has been helpful for you. My goal really is to provide something for you that helps your own perspective, that can empower you as a parent with some tools that may be helpful to your child. And you can expect much more content along these lines, both regarding the most severe cases that students go through, and regarding the more like run-of-the-mill, my kid is an AB student in all of his classes except for one where he's getting a D or C or even an F. Okay, thank you very much for your time. If you've made it this far, thanks a lot for watching. I would appreciate it if you would give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and if you could recommend this video to 2 people who you think might benefit from it, that would really help me a lot. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.